Hi everyone, hope you're well. So it's me, Gerald Garth again, and this is a follow-up video to one I did a week or so ago, basically about love and matters of the heart. I did a talk series, and was compelled to do a video version of it, and I wanted to see what people thought and see if this was something people would want to hear more about, and got a lot of great feedback, and so I have committed to doing that series. So if you could check out the last video, just to give an intro of what it was all about. It was basically matters of the heart and kind of elements around relationships and why we get what we get, particularly to and for black men. So check out that last video, and this one will probably, that one will give you more context to this one. So the last one was about what men really want and what men really get. And so some of the feedback from the group was that you get what you get because you get what you've been used to. And so that was a big resounding point among the group, particularly saying that when people are not open to new experiences, or they only sort of know one type of experience, you keep attracting what you have been getting. So there's that. I mentioned another part too around being open to new experiences. So when it comes to black men particularly, and the folks in this group, a lot of them spoke to around their lack of willingness to new experiences. And new experiences particularly meaning different types of groups or different people who they might not have normally engaged. And so one point was brought up too, is that, well, what you're looking for might come in a package you're not used to or weren't expecting. And so that was a kind of buzz about the room that let people know, well, if you've kind of been fishing for the same thing or using the same kind of bait, you're going to keep catching the same kind of fish. So that's a point. Another point was, why do we get what we get oftentimes? One point was that not knowing what you really want. So going into kind of these relational experiences, or these dating or whatever the kind of entertaining we do, a lot of times people are just kind of floundering around and not really going in with any intentions, or just kind of seeing what's what, we kicking it, we enjoying each other, whatever, but like not having any intentions. And so you can't get what you want intentionally if there are no intentions. Another point that was really resounding in the room is that a lot of times people, when they are, entertaining what they want to see next, are in survival mode. So that being, it's all about getting what I can get, taking what I can take, not being out here alone, just trying to make it physically, literally, and figuratively. A lot of times survival can be not trying to be alone or trying to be connected to, someone just for the sake of not being alone. But sometimes survival could be a matter of you being on the street or not, or being hungry or not. And so a lot of times too, when it comes to relationships and people we entertain, a big consistent thread could be survival. Another point that was really big in why we get what we get is from the lack of what was called self-time. I think that could tie to some other points, but the lack of self-time basically being that, if you're not spending time alone or spending time with yourself to identify what you want or what's good for you, or what I call defining your non-negotiables, you will just get what you get. A lot of times too, it has to start with yourself. It has to start with, carving out and identifying and shaping who you are as a person before you can invite anybody in. There's a phrase I like to say is that no one wants to be invited into a burning house. So if you're a burning house, if you're not together, if you need to sort of step away and get yourself together, do that. Step away. Because, how many of us have been entangled with somebody who on the surface seemed like they were great or, worth getting to know, and then you realize they were a burning house. So, when it comes to relationships, take some self-time. That kind of ties to that survival point too. A lot of times we are just out here trying to be yoked up, hedged up, arm in arm with somebody. Why? I think a big part of what helps us is to ask why. You know, when it comes to these relationships and, oh, I'm not meant to be alone. Oh, I'm ready to date. Oh, I'm ready to be married. Why? Why? Like literally, why? For what? You don't want to be alone? You want cute pictures? You know, you feel like you're of a certain age and so you're supposed to be married? No. Take some self-time, kind of define your intentions, see what you need to do for you, and then, you know, you'll be prepared, and what I like to say is released to move yourself into the next chapter. Another point, another kind of key element that arose when it comes to why we get what we get. One of the gentlemen in the room said, unrealistic expectations. So when we move into these relationships, and it kind of goes back to point one, you know, we are so sort of bent on having these traits and characteristics in this, you know, package. So it's like there have to be these, you know, these ways in this certain type of body, and it's just like a lot of times you are setting yourself up to fail. You setting yourself up, and you setting this other person up too, because you know you start to build this Frankenstein monster of a partner because you pulled a little of this, a little of that, this from the movies, this from previous relationships, this from your parents, this from social media, and kind of have concocted this thing in your head that's not a real person, and not aligning yourself up. And I like to say this too, like, you have designed and devised this dream person in your head. Are you that person's dream? Like I have to say all the time, you're looking for the man of your dreams. Are you living like the man of somebody else's dreams? Like, I think a lot of times too, we set ourselves up because we don't sort of think about reality or humanity, or we don't give space to humanity. You know, when it comes to like these differences or these what might be perceived as flaws or whatever, like you really set yourself up, you know, and this other person up to fail. So that's the point to consider too. What else? I mentioned it a bit too. Another point that was really big was what we deemed as societal impacts. So that could be a few things. That could be like societal conditioning, you know, because, you know, somebody mentioned Disney movies. You know, oftentimes you talk about Disney movies as sort of, you know, in reference to like how it impacts girls. But, you know, there's an impact that those movies and those types of experiences have on boys and men too. You know, so it's like, I think it could be one of a few ways. So there's either like men feel this pressure to be a Prince Charming or this sort of knight in shining armor. And goes back to the last point. If you ain't got yourself together, you can't be a knight for nobody. Be a knight for yourself. You know, so there's that pressure. And then there's a lot of men and boys who, even if they don't kind of directly acknowledge it, have a princess mentality too. So this whole concept of being swept away and, you know, being spotted out in a crowd and, you know, we saw each other and we heard this, you know, heard the rain falling and heard the violins playing and all that. Like, a lot of times, yes, but a whole bunch of more times, no. So like those societal impacts and conditioning, as well as social media as a societal impact. So, you know, we look at these hashtag relationship goals, hashtag, you know, bag goals, hashtag, you know, we out here, whatever. And it's just like, you know, you looking at these pictures like, ooh, I want to go to Aruba. Ooh, I want to have matching six packs. Ooh, I want to have, you know, a Parisian engagement. And I'm looking like, wait, why? You don't even like French food. Why you want to go to Paris? Or you do like French food too much, so how the six pack gonna happen? Like we do these things. It's like, oh well, you know, if it ain't this, if he ain't, you know, if it ain't no grand experience, then I don't want it. And you could really be setting yourself up to not have nothing. So that's a point too. And I'm not trying to discourage anybody from like having what they want to see for themselves, but like we have to be realistic. I think that goes into the point too when it comes to matters of the heart and why we get what we get or not, is around preconceptions. And so going back to a previous point around, you know, aligning these packages being like a person with their, you know, what they bring you is like you just kind of perceive a certain thing. So, you know, black people it is, or, you know, Asian Americans this, or tall people this, or people from the South this, or like all these different things. It's just like you could really be setting yourself up to like either not have some good thing or be floating around in some like space of ignorance. I definitely would say ignorance, because you know, the whole building an identity on concepts and preconceptions, it's just like you don't get to pick. You don't get to pick and say like, oh, well, I don't want you doing that for me, but I'll do it to other people. So like that's a point we need to consider when it comes to the whys. Another point, on a more serious level, they've all been serious, but even more so is why we get what we get is around mental health concerns. Like, you know, a lot of the work that I do, people might know this, but work really closely with mental and emotional health. I lead a nonprofit, the Ahmad Institute, Arming Minorities Against Addiction and Disease, ahmad.org. But a big part of our work is addressing, identifying, and supporting people through mental health support. So that could be therapy, group therapy, one-on-one therapy, you know, treatment. There's all these different options around mental health concern. But a big part of like getting mental health support is like acknowledging that there's a concern or the need for support. And like a good point of thought is, how does mental health show up in like our relationships? And I will say, particularly among Black people and Black LGBT people, there is a lot of trauma and sort of these undiagnosed issues that really show up. Like, you know, I see pretty regularly, you know, there's these, you know, these experiences where people are, you know, saying, well, you know, if he don't slap you around a little bit, that means he don't really love you. Or, you know, he batted me in the mouth, but I was talking a lot, so like, you know, that was a lot. Or he choked me out, but he was just having a bad day. So no, none of that's okay. That's not okay. And so, you know, you can't look at, you know, building healthy relationships without first addressing like your individual trauma. And that takes time. That takes time. And that sometimes that takes support. And like recognizing it's no shame or no shade in like getting some support. And so, side note too, a lot of the work that we can do around destigmatizing mental and emotional support helps us prepare ourselves for relationships. Those are just some of the whys, some of the things that I just wanted to share in response to the first video, which is the what we really want, what we really get. And so let me know what you think. Let me know how that was, or if you had more thoughts or wanted to kind of have some more dialogue around that. So thank you. Next part of this series, we'll be looking at some types of relationships. So within this series, we looked at certain types of focuses and arrangements and kind of all these different things that tie into relationships. And we'll also look at the difference between attraction and love. So those were major kind of elements that I feel like you can't have dialogue around without looking at. And lastly, the whole series will end in solutions. Anybody who knows me and anything that I do, I carve out just as much or even more time around identifying solutions and best practices. So let me know what you think. I'll be back, and I'm looking forward to hearing your feedback. Thanks again.